Welcome back to MTS. In this video, we are going to cover access control lists, better known as ACLs. An access control list allows more flexibility in assigning permissions to files or directories within Linux. It is used to give permissions for any user or group to any disk resource. I am currently logged in as user, so you can see here, and I am in a user's home directory. Within the directory, we have two other directories, one called test and one called dev. And both directories are owned by the user, and the group ownership is also user. We have another user on this VM called test, who is not a part of the user group. Actually, if you do ID test, we will see that test is part of its own group test. As we know, if we take a look at the home directory, for the user, we gave others, which is depicted right here, the ability to read and access within this directory. So I'm going to switch users to test. Type in the password. Now that I am test, clear the screen. I am in the test users home directory, so I want to navigate to the users home directory. So I am able to read and execute within this in the user's home directory. And I fall on the others, which I have permission to also read and execute within these directories, the dev and the test directory. Again, test is not a part of the group user, and we know that it's not user. So we would use an access control list to allow test or a specific group to get certain permissions within these directories. And here's how we would do so. So first of all, let's check to see if there are any access control lists listed on these directories. So the command is getfacl, and you just input the file or directory name. We see that the owner's user, the group is user, and the user group and others, as we already covered, has these permissions. So in theory, test can go into the directory, but test cannot do anything within this directory. Permissions denied. So we use a getfacl command to see any access control list listed on the directory, and we're going to use the setfacl command to issue an access control list to a file or a directory. So we are going to give the test user read, write, and execute permissions on the dev directory. In order to set an ACL, the user must have root privileges. So I am going to just switch to root because test doesn't have those privileges. I'm going to set facl. I'm going to modify the user permissions, and the username is test. We're going to give them read, write, execute permissions on the home user dev directory. And if we do a getfacl for that directory, we can see now that the ACL was added here. So we know the owner and the user. So the user has read, write, execute. Then it says here, the user test has read, write, execute. So then the group has read, write, execute. There's a mask for the user test, and others has read, write, execute. So now, if I go back to the test user, and I am already in that directory, I can create a file that I wasn't able to create before. Now, if we were to take a look at the permissions for the dev directory, we don't see the period at the end anymore. We see that there's a plus, which also signifies that this file has an ACL added to it. And we know what that ACL is now. So now the user and anyone within the user group and the specific user test, not even anyone in the test user group, the specific user test can access and write changes to this directory. You can do the same for adding the ACL for a specific group. We have to log back in as root again. And now we are going to add the group test to the test directory, even though it's owned by user. So let me just refresh your memory. The test directory is owned by user, and the group owner is user. We are going to add another group called test to have read, write, execute permissions for the directory. So in theory, test can read and execute this directory because test falls on the other. I'm going to remove the other. So to remove the other permissions on these directories, you're going to use the chmod command. We are going to do others. We're going to minus rx, and then we're going to do it for dev and test. Forgot my present working directory. So we are going to do it for home, user, dev, home, user, test. And if we do an LL, so now no other have permissions to access these directories, but the test user can still access the dev directory because they have read, write, and execute as an ACL. So now we're going to issue the group test and give them read, write, execute permissions to this directory. So then the group user and the group test will have access to this directory. We will issue the setfacl command. We're going to modify a group, and the group name is going to be test. We're going to give them read, write, execute permissions to the test directory. Have to make sure I use the correct path. And then if we were to run the command getfacl on that directory, we will see the same results. Instead of user down here, it's now group. So the user, the group, and then the group test have read, write, execute. Then the mask for the same, and others do not have files. So if I exit and I log in as test, and I'm still in the same directory, if I try to go into the test directory, I have access to the directory because I am a part of the test group. We see that both these directories have an ACL added to it, signified by the plus sign here at the end of the permissions. And we know that the test is the other user and group that can access these directories. So if I switch users to another user, this user is in his home directory. We are then going to try to access the user's home directory, which we can because the user's home directory does have read and execute permissions for others. So inside this directory, this user student doesn't fall, obviously it's not the user, nor does it fall on the user or the test group. So if student was to try to access the dev directory, permission denied, and the same for test, permission denied. If the student was added to the test group or the user group, then that student would have access to any one of these two directories. So let's do that. So let's switch back to root. Go back to being a student user, and we are still in the user's home directory. And if we remember the ACL for the dev directory, the owner, user, and group have read, write, execute permissions, but then the user test also has read, write, execute permissions. So student is not the user. So this student user cannot access the dev directory. So if he attempts to, we'll get permission denied. So if we check the ACL on the test directory, we know that the user and group have the user and the group has read, write, execute capabilities, along with the group test, which also has read, write, execute abilities. Student user is a part of that group, and so the student's going to change into the user's home directory. And we already tried dev and got a permission denied, but if we go into test, we will get in. And since the group has read, write permissions, the student user can create a file here. If we want to remove any ACL that was set, we can remove it with the B argument. If we want to remove the ACL that was set on the dev directory, we run the same command with the B argument, and then we will issue the directory. Student can't do it, so I have to log back in as root, and then I can run the setfacl -B on home, user, and dev. And if I do a getfacl on home, user, dev, if I can spell it correctly, so let me just clear the screen, we will see that now there are no ACLs set here. And if we were to do a listing, you notice that the plus sign is also gone. So that is a brief rundown on ACLs, on how you can use it. You can do a lot more with it. If you would like to learn more about the arguments that you can use, with ACLs. I always recommend to visit the man page to provide some examples. So that is the ACL command in a nutshell. You can do more with this command. And if you have any more questions about ACLs and setting them or removing them, you can reach out to us down in the comment section. Thank you for watching this video. If you did like the video, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.